Stop. Beloved Starseed of Gaia. This transmission comes directly from the Arcturian High Council, and it has reached you now because the separation is already active. The old line has already begun to fall away, and what you have been interpreting as rejection, disconnection, or quiet loss is not what it appears to be. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly why your life has felt like separation, what is being removed from your path, and what the Arcturians already know about this phase. But here is the first revelation: the people who have distanced themselves, the doors that have closed, the circles that have grown quieter, none of that was failure. It was preparation. The Arcturian High Council has already mapped this pattern, and what you are living through has a name, a sequence, and a destination that the old line you were leaving behind was never built to reach. You did not find this message by accident. Your path brought you here because the separation has already begun, and tonight, nothing will remain hidden. The full nature of what is being removed, why it is being removed, and what the High Council already knows about the mission waiting at the end of this narrowing, all of it will be revealed in this transmission. The algorithm only delivered this. It did not create the timing. What you call loneliness is what the Arcturian High Council calls root refinement. What you call rejection is the first visible symptom of a selected line separating from an environment it was never meant to remain inside. The old circle did not abandon you. It weakened first, and the visible distance followed. That sequence is not random. It is recognized. It is recorded. And it's precisely why this transmission reached your path tonight. Like this transmission, if you know your life has been narrowing for a reason. Comment 111 if you know this message reached you at the exact right time. Comment 777 if you feel the old line is already falling away. Subscribe to Arcturian Chosen Path if you are ready to understand the separation instead of blaming yourself. This is not just a message, it is a point of recognition. What has been separating you from the old line has already been seen, and the path is already responding. You are guided here because the separation is already active. There is a specific kind of pain that does not have a name in ordinary language. It is not grief in the traditional sense, because nothing dramatic has necessarily occurred. It is not loneliness in the way most people use that word, because the viewer may be surrounded by people and still feel it. It is not failure in the measurable sense, because nothing specific may have gone wrong. It is the feeling that the life you were living no longer fits the being you are becoming, and that the gap between those two realities is widening every single day, pulling relationships, environments, and identities away from you with a quiet, steady, and seemingly unstoppable force. There is no single event to point to. There is no moment of rupture you can replay and analyze. There is only the accumulation, the slow, daily widening of a distance that no conversation has been able to close, no effort has been able to reverse, and no amount of self-examination has been able to explain away. That is the feeling this transmission is here to name. And the Arcturian High Council does not call that feeling loss. They call it the first readable symptom of root refinement. When a selected line begins to activate, the first thing that moves is not toward the viewer. The first thing that moves is away. This is not a symbolic idea, it is a structural one. Before a path can open in the direction it was built to travel, it must shed the weight of everything that was never designed to make that journey. Think of a road that has been carrying too much traffic for too long. Vehicles that were never meant for the terrain it is about to cross. Companions that were matched to an earlier and easier stretch of ground. The road does not announce its thinning. It simply becomes less traveled. The traffic drops. The familiar vehicles stop appearing, and the traveler, still standing on the same road, begins to notice the quiet without yet understanding what the quiet is preparing. That is the earliest form of separation. Not drama, not departure, just the gradual, undeniable withdrawal of what was never meant to go further. That shedding does not arrive as a clear announcement. It does not arrive as a dramatic farewell or a clean and logical severance. It arrives as distance. It arrives as relationships that once felt close becoming inexplicably strained. It arrives as environments that once felt like home beginning to feel like rooms you have outgrown. It arrives as the quiet but unmistakable sense that the people around you can no longer quite reach you, and that you can no longer quite reach them, and that no amount of honest explanation makes the gap feel smaller. That is not rejection, that is the geometry of path refinement making itself visible in relational form. The Arcturian High Council does not track pain. What it tracks is pattern, and the pattern it has recorded across selected lines is precise. The separation does not begin at the moment of visible distance. It begins the moment the line itself achieves an internal frequency that the old environment can no longer match, the visible falling away, the friend who grows distant, the group that stops including you, the connection that slowly goes cold for no reason. Either party can articulate, that is not the beginning of the separation. That is the surface confirmation of a separation that was already complete at a level neither party has access to, through ordinary understanding. You were already gone from that line before the distance became visible. The distance was simply the last thing to catch up. This matters because most people experiencing this phase do not read it this way. Most people experiencing this phase turn the weight of every departing relationship inward and begin constructing a story about what is wrong with them. They begin asking what they did, what they said, what they failed to be, what essential quality they are still missing that would have made those relationships hold. They scan the inventory of their own personality, their own history, their own behavior, searching for the defect that explains the pattern of departure. And because the mind is powerful and will always find what it is searching for, it eventually produces an answer, usually a cruel one. You are too much. You are not enough. You are difficult. You are broken. You are the common variable in every connection that failed to last. The interrogation does not stop there. It deepens. It begins to reach backward into older separations, older distances, older moments where something similar was felt, but never fully named. And suddenly, the current experience is not just a present event. It is evidence of a lifelong pattern, a personality-level truth, a structural deficiency in the self that has been quietly confirming itself through every relationship that did not survive the distance. This is where the separation process becomes most dangerous from the inside, not because the losses are unbearable, though they are, but because the mind's interpretation of those losses is building a case that has nothing to do with what is actually happening at the level of the path. The Arcturian High Council is not looking at the variable the viewer is looking at. The High Council is looking at the geometry of the path itself. And what the geometry shows is not a person with a repeating defect. What it shows is a line that has been increasing in frequency while the surrounding environment remained static, and that statistical incompatibility eventually expressing itself as relational distance, social withdrawal, and the progressive collapse of old circles that were built to match a version of the path that no longer exists. You did not drive people away. Your path outgrew the frequency they were built to share. What has been exposed in you does not need more self-blame. It needs clearer recognition and proper guidance. If you know this message touched a process that has already started, Chosen One Manifest, the protocol for selected souls, was built for exactly that threshold. It is a structured path protocol for those whose route is already narrowing and who need to understand the logic of the separation before fear mislabels it as failure. It gives you a direct map for reading what is being removed, understanding what is being prepared, and moving through this phase without turning every loss into evidence against yourself. The complete access point is in the first pinned comment, but only for a limited window. Now understand the first phase of what the High Council calls relational pruning. This is the phase most viewers will recognize immediately, because it is the phase they are most likely already inside. Relational pruning does not begin with conflict. It does not begin with a fight, a betrayal, a single moment of rupture that can be identified and analyzed. It begins with silence. It begins with the conversation that never quite reaches depth. It begins with the friend who is still present in name but whose presence no longer carries what it once did. It begins with the gathering you attend but leave feeling more alone than when you arrived. It begins with the smile you perform and the explanation you offer and the effort you sustain. And the hollow feeling at the center of all of it, the feeling that something essential is missing from every exchange, that you are speaking but not being heard, that you are present but not being met. that the connection is technically intact but spiritually evacuated. Notice what that hollow feeling does to you over time. It does not simply produce sadness, it produces a specific kind of exhaustion. The exhaustion of continuing to invest in connections that return less and less of what is put into them, of showing up fully to exchanges that meet you only at the surface, of maintaining the performance of closeness when the substance of it has already quietly departed. You keep going through the motions because the structure of the relationship still exists. The history still exists. The name and the category still exist. But the living resonance inside it has already begun its withdrawal, and some part of you already knows this, even if you have not yet found the language to say it clearly. This is pruning, and it precedes the visible fall in the way because the path is not brutal. It reduces before it removes. It creates distance before it creates absence. It gives every relationship the opportunity to either evolve into compatibility or reveal its incompatibility before the final severance makes that incompatibility, before the final severance makes that incompatibility. The hollowness you feel in connections that should feel warm is not you imagining things. It is the past's first signal that the pruning has already begun, and that those connections are in the process of completing their purpose on your route. A branch that has finished its function does not fall dramatically from the tree. It first stops producing. It first goes still, and only after the stillness has confirmed what the tree's deeper intelligence already knew does the separation complete itself at the structural level. The hollowness is the stillness. The eventual distance is the branch completing its fall. The second phase is what the High Council identifies as environmental incompatibility. This is when the settings, structures, and daily containers of your life begin to feel like spaces that were built for someone else. The job that once felt purposeful begins to feel like constraint. The community that once felt supportive begins to feel like a performance space. The city, the neighborhood, the daily rhythm. None of it quite fits anymore. And the discomfort is not easily explained to the people around you because from the outside, everything appears unchanged. You are in the same place. You have the same life. And yet the same life now feels like a room that is slowly running out of air. The walls have not moved. The furniture is the same, but the space that once felt like enough now presses against you from every direction. And the pressure is not dramatic enough to name as crisis, and not subtle enough to ignore, and has no single source you can address or resolve. It simply accumulates, day after day, the same surroundings producing a slightly sharper sense of constriction, a slightly more undeniable awareness that you are living inside a shape that no longer matches the shape you are becoming. This is not restlessness in the ordinary sense. This is incompatibility made environmental. The selected line has already outgrown the structure that was designed to hold the previous version of the path, and the discomfort is simply the geometry of that mismatch making itself felt in the body and in daily life. The structure was not wrong for who you were. It is simply insufficient for who you are now, and entirely unable to contain who you are still in the process of becoming. What makes this phase particularly difficult is that it arrives without immediate replacement. The path does not remove the old structure and simultaneously reveal the new one. There is a gap. There is a period of standing in spaces that no longer fit while the next structure has not yet formed enough to be visible. That gap is where most people lose interpretive ground. That gap is where the mind, unable to tolerate ambiguity, reverts to the story of personal failure. If I am uncomfortable everywhere, something must be wrong with me. If nothing fits, I must be the problem. If the old world feels gone, and the new world is not yet here, perhaps the new world is not gone at all. The High Council's reading of that gap is entirely different. The gap is not evidence of stagnation. The gap is the root itself at its most active. The removal of old containers, old relationships, old environments. That is not emptiness preceding failure. That is space being created for a line that requires different conditions to sustain itself than the ones that were sufficient before. No new structure can be built on ground that is still occupied. The clearing must precede the construction, and the period of standing in cleared ground, uncomfortable, exposed, without the familiar landmarks that once told you where you were, That is not the absence of movement. That is the path doing its most essential work. The third phase is what the High Council calls the misreading of silence. This is one of the most painful and least recognized phases of the separation process. As the pruning continues and the old relational environment thins, the viewer typically enters a period of extended solitude that does not feel like peace. It feels like abandonment. It feels like evidence. It feels like the universe confirming the internal narrative of defect. Because now not only do relationships keep ending or fading, but new ones are not arriving either. The social world has grown quiet in a way that seems to suggest that the problem is structural, that the viewer is simply not someone others want to remain close to, that the isolation is not circumstantial, but permanent. The silence amplifies everything. In the absence of relational noise, the mind turns inward with unusual intensity, and what it finds there is not comfort. It finds the accumulated weight of every departure, every growing distance, every conversation that ended without resolution, every circle that closed without explanation. And in that silence, those experiences speak with a volume they never had when life was full of distraction and movement. The silence feels like a verdict being delivered in the absence of any appeal. But what the High Council sees during this period is not social failure. What it sees is the path holding space. The silence before a selected line stabilizes is not punitive. It is protective, because the viewer at this stage is still partially reading the world through the interpretive lens of the old line, still partially using the old relational frameworks, the old social self-definitions, the old methods of seeking and sustaining connection that were built for environments the path has already outgrown. Bringing new relationships through those old frameworks would not produce connection, it would produce repetition. It would produce another cycle of apparent closeness, followed by incompatibility, followed by distance, followed by the same self-interrogation. The silence that precedes relational repositioning is not rejection held open. It is the path refusing to fill the space before the viewer has developed the interpretive language to sustain what belongs in it. The fourth recognition is what the High Council calls the moment of mislabeled loneliness. There is a particular quality of spiritual loneliness that is different from ordinary social loneliness, and the difference is crucial. Ordinary social loneliness is the absence of people. The loneliness of root refinement is the presence of people who cannot reach the level at which you are now operating. You can be in a room full of relationships, functional ones, warm ones, even loving ones, and still feel fundamentally unreached. You can be heard without being understood. You can be liked without being known. You can be liked without being known. You can be included without being met. And this creates a specific kind of loneliness that is worse in some ways than simple absence, because it is surrounded by evidence that nothing is technically wrong, and yet something essential is absent from every exchange. And the absence is not anyone's fault, and it cannot be resolved by trying harder. And the more honest you are about it, the less you are able to explain it in terms the people around you can receive. What makes this loneliness particularly isolating is the impossibility of sharing it accurately. When you try to describe it, you encounter the precise limitation that defines it. The people you attempt to describe it to are the same people whose relational range cannot meet you where you now are. So the description itself becomes another instance of misalignment. You reach for words, they offer comfort, the comfort does not land, and you are left more alone than before the reaching, not because they failed you, but because the frequency gap that produces the loneliness also prevents the bridge that would resolve it from being built using the old materials. The Arcturian High Council does not read this loneliness as deficiency. It reads it as the perceptual consequence of operating at a frequency that the current relational environment was not built to match. You are not lonely because something is wrong with you. You are experiencing the specific isolation of a selected line that has moved past the relational range of its previous environment. And while that is not comfortable, it is not permanent, and it is not a verdict. The fifth recognition is what the High Council calls the pressure of repeated misunderstanding. This is the pattern where the viewer tries, repeatedly and genuinely, to communicate something true about their inner experience, their perception of their path, their sense that something significant is happening to them. and is consistently met with incomprehension, dismissal, or the kind of concerned reframing that attempts to reduce what they are experiencing to something more manageable, more ordinary, more treatable. You are told you are overthinking. You are told you are too sensitive. You are told that you need to lower your expectations, simplify your thinking, reconnect with practical reality. And the people delivering these messages are not cruel, they are sincere. But they are sincere from inside a frequency that cannot access what you are attempting to describe, and every attempt to translate to the untranslatable leaves you feeling more isolated, not less, because now the loneliness has been named and named incorrectly, and the incorrect name is the one that everyone around you is now using. The repeated correction accumulates. It does not stay in any single exchange. It deposits itself into the viewer's self-concept over time, layer by layer, building a sediment of externally sourced doubt over an internal experience that was accurate from the beginning. And eventually, the question is no longer only what is wrong with my relationships, the question becomes what is wrong with my perception. Whether the internal compass that has been registering this separation, this narrowing, this sense of a different route being prepared, whether that compass itself has malfunctioned, whether you have been navigating by a broken instrument all along. This is one of the most identity-destabilizing aspects of the separation process, because repeated misunderstanding does not only produce isolation, it produces doubt. It produces the slow corrosion of self-trust that comes from having your most honest perceptions consistently reflected back to you as distortion. And eventually, if it continues long enough, it produces the question that the separation process is most dangerous for generating. The question of whether you are the one who has it wrong, whether the people around you who do not feel this, who are not experiencing this, are closer to the truth than you are, whether the fact that no one else seems to be living this means that it is not real. The High Council's position on this is unambiguous. The inability of your current environment to recognize what you are experiencing is not evidence that it is not real. It is evidence that your current environment was not built to recognize it. The diagnosis is not in the perceptions. The diagnosis is in the mismatch between the path you are on and the interpretive range of the environment you are currently surrounded by. The sixth recognition is what the High Council identifies as the collapse of identity before reconstruction. This is the phase that most closely resembles what ordinary psychological frameworks would call a crisis, because it is a period of losing coherence around who you are, what your life means, and what direction is even available to you. The old identity, the one built from the relational environment that has been pruning itself away, no longer holds. The person you were inside that environment, the social self you constructed to function within it, the self-concept that those relationships helped you maintain, all of it begins to dissolve as the relationships themselves dissolve. And because the new identity, the one being built by the selected line as it stabilizes, has not yet become fully visible, there is a period of genuine structural disorientation. Not knowing who you are is frightening. It is disorienting. And it has no easy resolution from inside ordinary frameworks. The disorientation is compounded by the fact that the old identity did not feel like construction while it was intact. It felt like the truth of who you were. The relationships that maintained it, the environments that reflected it back, the social roles that gave it daily confirmation. All of that felt like reality, not scaffolding. And so when the scaffolding begins to collapse, it does not feel like a structure being cleared. It feels like the ground itself giving way. It feels like the loss of something essential rather than the removal of something temporary. The fear that arises in this phase is not irrational. It is the natural response to standing in a space where the previous definition of self is no longer adequate and the next one has not yet arrived. But the High Council reads this not as breakdown. It reads this as the interval between what was and what is being formed. The collapse of an identity built on incompatible ground is not the destruction of the self. It is the clearing of a self-definition that was never adequate to the path being prepared. You cannot carry the old self-concept into the new route. It was built from the interpretive materials of an environment your line has already outgrown. The dissolution is not loss of self. It is the making of space for a self-definition that can actually sustain what comes next. This is the full weight of what the Arcturian High Council has already seen in your path. Not failure, not deficiency, not a series of random relational wounds accumulated by someone who simply cannot make things work. What the High Council sees is a selected line under the pressure of active separation, shedding incompatible weight, creating necessary space, producing the exact cluster of experiences that appear, from the inside, to be rejection, loss, misunderstanding, and dissolution, and are, from the root level, the structured and recognizable preparation of a path that is narrowing not because it is ending, but because it is becoming every phase that has been named in this transmission. The relational pruning, the environmental incompatibility, the misread silence, the mislabeled loneliness, the pressure of repeated misunderstanding, the collapse of identity. None of these are isolated events. They are a sequence. They are the recognizable stages of a single coherent process that the High Council has mapped across selected lines before yours, and will map across selected lines after. The fact that you have experienced several of them, perhaps all of them, is not evidence that your life has been falling apart. It is evidence that the separation process is progressing exactly as the selected line requires it to progress. The sequence is not punitive, it is architectural. The people who fell away were not wrong to fall away. Neither were you wrong to let them. The environments that stopped fitting were not failures of circumstance. They were completed containers whose purpose was fulfilled at a previous stage of the route. The silence that has been expanding around you is not abandonment. It is the path itself holding its own space, refusing to fill the cleared ground with material that cannot sustain what is being prepared on it. What you have been calling rejection, the Arcturian High Council calls the first readable confirmation that the selected line is moving. What you have been calling loneliness, it calls root refinement at its most active and most demanding. What you have been calling the collapse of your social world, it calls the clearing of ground that will hold something the old relational environment was structurally unable to contain. You were not discarded. You were separated. And separation, in Arcturian intelligence, is not what happens to souls who are found lacking. It is what happens to souls whose path has outgrown the line it was temporarily held inside, and who are now in the precise phase that precedes the opening of the route they were built to travel. Say this once, aloud or in the silence of your own mind. I do not call the pruning rejection. What is leaving my life is not random. The path is narrowing because it is preparing to rise. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that this separation has already touched your life. It could be people falling away, the feeling of not belonging, repeated distance, unexplained isolation, or the sense that your old path no longer fits. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognized something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who feels alone, cut off, or misunderstood, and cannot explain why. And if you are ready to understand the separation instead of blaming yourself, subscribe to Arcturian Chosen Path. You are not watching this by accident, you are recognizing a path already in motion. And this is only the beginning.